11 of the 13 biggest speeches were when she was Secretary of State. Do you see a link there?
I don't, because it's more logical that right after he got out of the White House, before the foundation's activities and before he did so much good around the world, he's going to be less valuable. But I know that former presidents receive fees of this dimension, so I'm not shocked. But I can't read the motives of people who pay. But I can tell you that Bill Clinton has nothing to do and religiously had a wall between himself and Secretary Clinton when she was Secretary of State.
Oh, that's probably the first thing I believe. There was a wall between Hillary and Bill while she was Secretary of State, and I believe that wall existed many years prior. Joining us now is Sharyl Attkisson, Emmy Award-winning journalist and an anchor at the upcoming Sinclair Broadcasting brand new show. She's got a Sunday show, and of course the author of Stonewalled. Let me ask you right off the bat, Sharyl, congratulations on the new show. Your voice and your face much needed on the airwaves, and talk about what the show's going to be like and when it's going to start.
Well, we're still finishing up deciding the format. It's changeable now, but the basic idea is accountability watchdog reporting, like I used to do for CBS, whether it's corporations, politicians, government, a lot of the stories that you're just not seeing much on the news anymore about, and yet the viewers and public find very informative, and that's really how they see our role as being very valuable in the press, and we're not doing as much of it.
Well, congratulations again, and I'm sure it'll be a great success. And let's talk about this whole Hillary thing. Let me ask you this. How do you think the media has handled so far the revelations from the book? I mean, the New York Times has been out there, certainly, with story after story. Overall, what's your assessment?
I can't say that I've done some broad canvassing where I'm in a position to, give a big broad viewpoint, but I think it's receiving a fair amount of coverage, and as well it should. These questions should be asked, maybe should have been asked years ago, but certainly in the face of new evidence and reports, there should be further reporting on it.
Yeah, all right. So, these issues, this quid pro quo, I'm afraid that the media is setting up Republicans and conservatives and anybody else who might be interested in saying, okay, you're looking for a quid pro quo, prove it. But it's so hard to prove a quid pro quo. I mean, Menendez is indicted on allegations of a quid pro quo. He may not be convicted because the evidence may not be there. It's very hard to do. Do you fear that Republicans are falling into that trap, that they're saying, there's got to be something here, there's got to be something here, and if there's nothing provable, that even though there's impropriety, it'll still amount to, see, I told you there's nothing here?
Well, Republicans are having a hard time, just as a group, maybe not individually, deciding what to do and what kind of strategy they want to have on all fronts, whether it's this or healthcare.gov. So who knows what they're going to come up with. But I think you're absolutely right about the quid pro quo. With all the stories I covered over the years with Democrats and Republicans regarding campaign contributions and handing out earmarks to pet projects, in so many cases you can draw a direct line from conversations they had to a project they funded to a campaign contribution they got. And yet, in the end, you have to get inside their mind to be able to prove, they say, a quid pro quo. Well, in my mind, there wasn't one. I was just helping somebody I would have helped anyway. So if that's your bar, that's going to be a really high bar to cross.
And again, if they can't prove a quid pro quo, does that give Hillary and her supporters an opportunity to say, see, there's nothing there. They can't prove anything. There's nothing there.
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's what they'll say anyway. I sort of am interested when I hear them say things like, we've turned over 55,000 documents. You'll see there's nothing in there regarding Benghazi. And you have to laugh and say, of course there's not going to be anything of note in the ones you turned over. We're worried about the ones you didn't. But yes, they will have ways, perhaps some of them legitimate, to say that there was no quid pro quo. But I would argue just in general, there is a higher standard, obviously, for public officials. There's a higher standard for public officials who want to continue in public office versus a president who's sort of out of the limelight and done with his basic elected public duty, and he's just giving speeches, as president emeritus, versus somebody who is going to be back in that world, or whose spouse, as we all knew, would probably run for president someday. I would just say they should be more concerned about appearances every step of the way. And the Clintons have known for decades that this was the path that she would ultimately hope to take, and so on.
And they didn't heed your advice. Okay, we're coming back with more from Sharyl Attkisson. Don't go away, folks.
Take executive action on immigration? Bucket. New climate regulations? Bucket. It's the right thing to do.
All right, we're back with Sharyl Attkisson, of course, the author of Stonewalled. And Sharyl, did you happen to catch any of or all of the president's performance from the White House Correspondents' Dinner?
I only saw a replay of the anger translator. Unfortunately, that's the only part that I caught. I was actually at a dinner honoring Joan Claybrook, a public citizen for 50 years of advocacy and watchdog activity on behalf of the public.
Well, that's a much better event to be at, a much more meaningful event, maybe not as glamorous, but you heard about, I'm sure, the list that rhymes with a bucket list, and that was one of the things he gave an example of, pass immigration executive order, bucket. EPA rules, implement EPA rules on climate change, bucket. And to me, it's funny, but that's really what I believe his attitude is. But it's not with the B, it's with the F. I mean, he just doesn't care, and he will do what he wants to do, as he has done.
Well, I think he's made it clear, and the benign interpretation is he really believes in these things and really feels as though they're so important that if what he views as an obstructive Congress, including Democrats sometimes as well as Republicans, are going to stand in the way, it's his responsibility to do it. But, yes, it's funny as a joke, but so sadly true, the obstruction of the press and the unilateral actions that sometimes have been taken that have been questioned by courts and by others under the law. I mean, it is a funny laugh line, but I do think it's a sad commentary in some ways.
All right, now I want to get back to Hillary for a second. She spoke at Women's Forum here in the city, I believe, last Thursday. And, she talked about equal pay for women, which, of course, she's guilty of, if you believe in that, she's guilty in not holding up her end of the bargain there. But here's what she said about women's reproductive health and laws that have been passed. Listen to this.
Yes, we've cut the maternal mortality rate in half, but far too many women are still denied critical access to reproductive health care and safe childbirth. All the laws we've passed don't count for much if they're not enforced. Rights have to exist in practice, not just on paper. Laws have to be backed up with resources and political will, and deep-seated cultural codes, religious beliefs, and structural biases have to be changed.
Deep-seated religious beliefs have to be changed in order to fall in line with a minority view in this country on abortion. It's frightening. It's out of touch. Her audience ate it up, but it's frightening to hear her say that deep-seated religious beliefs have to be changed, at least to me.
Well, I don't think Christians, Jews, Muslims, or whoever they are would think too much of that. The idea that a politician believes that their religious beliefs ought to be changed by politicians for whatever goal they may have. I'm a little surprised to hear that, but as you said, the audience seemed to have an overwhelming response, so clearly some people agree with that.
Yeah, well, that's a representation of the, I think, 30% of Americans who believe on abortion on demand at any time, any place, for any reason. Sharyl, great to talk to you. We'll talk to you soon. Always appreciate you coming on.
I'm glad you had me. Thank you.
Thank you. Sharyl Attkisson, ladies and gentlemen, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. Coming up next, it's going to be Gimme 5. But first, starting tomorrow, the Steve Malzberg Show, that's this show, will be moving times. Our time is changing. Starting tomorrow, you'll be watching me at 5 p.m. Eastern instead of 3. 2 p.m. Pacific. 2 p.m. Pacific, okay? So that's instead of noon. So the same great guests, I'll be here same great commentary and all that kind of stuff, but new time, 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. Make sure you keep it right here and note the time change for the Steve Malzberg Show only on Newsmax Television.